Okay. Hi guys. I'm gonna make this relatively short, but let's jump in. So, first question. I'm making a Twine game for a class and my thesis project. I'm doing this from the ground up and it's all new. I feel like every plot point I come up with is derivative of something else, and I'm committing unintentional copyright infringement. Is there a way to snap out of that? My advice to you would be to snap out of that. Every work is derivative, right? I mean, that's how we operate as creative human beings. That's how our creativity works. We are an amalgamation of the experiences that we have had. And the things that we create are always heavily influenced by the things that we know, that we do, that we love. Don't expect that to change. Don't expect that to stop. So if that's your concern, if your concern is that, you feel like you can see the influence of the things that in the work that you're doing, that this character is a direct lift of some other character from something that you're familiar with, or this plot point, this action is something that is taken directly from something else. Don't worry too much about that. Like, don't stress yourself about that. Honestly, that's a great place to start. And I think that kind of thing, it's possible for it to be, too blatant. It's possible for it to feel like it's, it rings hollow or something like that. But that's a first draft problem. I think that you will find that when you create the entire thing, and you have some perspective on it and how it all hangs together, and then you go back and you massage some of those points, you'll discover ways that, that character isn't exactly the same as the character that it was based off of. And yeah, maybe in a lot of ways it still retains personality or characteristics, or the events that happen to him or her are very, very similar, but it quickly becomes influenced by all of the other things that are in your game, that are part of your world. And I think that you will also find that, especially after a second draft, those things that are so obvious to you are not so obvious to other people. You can see, because you know where this came from, you know what your process was, you have a sense of feeling like you ripped something off. But to other people will see the uniqueness of your world, and they won't sort of dwell on the parts that are derivative. This is true of pretty much all creative work, in my experience. There's nothing new under the sun. Great artists steal, all of that. This is part of why it's important, if you are going to be any kind of a creative artist, to really be aware, to be conscious and conscientious about the things that you consume, the experiences that you consume, not just in media, not just, the games that you play and the books that you read and the TV shows that you watch, but also the things that you do, the hobbies that you have, the places that you travel, the people that you talk to, because all of that becomes part of the corpus of experience that you draw on whenever you create something new. I hope that helps. I mean, congrats to you for taking on this challenge, and for caring about it, for not just sleepwalking through it, which is something that's easy to do. I don't think you need to worry quite as much about that. And I think that especially if you just push through this, I think that you'll find that this is something that kind of naturally slips away as you make your story your own in subsequent drafts. So Sergari, who worked on this game, how do you safeguard against the usability trap of our users already know how to play our games when you have a long-running franchise like Nancy Drew? Okay, so there's two ways that I can read this, and I think they're both really good questions, and I don't know that I have a good answer to either one of them. The first is most of the people playing the game are familiar with the tropes of a Nancy Drew game. And so if we do anything that deviates from that, from the expected rote pattern, then they're going to miss it because they are so honed in on the things that they're expecting, reasonably out of a Nancy Drew game. The other way to read it is that the things that are in the Nancy Drew game are so close. They're iterations on previous titles, and so most of the audience is able to follow along. Any kind of small jumps in mental models, they're able to make no problem because they're all coming from essentially the same place. But when you get to a game like this, which is, I actually have no idea how many titles this is, 20 titles into the Nancy Drew series. Anybody who's a new player is actually coming from a completely different place and doesn't have the same kind of backlog of mental models, of understanding of the tropes of a Nancy Drew game, to approach puzzles from the same perspective as most of the players who do have that. I mean, I think in both of those cases, I don't have a great cut and dry solution. I think that the hardest thing is to identify where those problems are, and that's what you're saying. This is a usability trap, right? Having developed these tropes makes it easy to ignore or to just be unaware of the usability problems that can arise, especially in that second case, right, with new users. The only solution that I have for that, I mean, as a designer, you can definitely cultivate a sense of empathy with naive users, and that's something that's really important to do and to work at. So as a designer, you should be approaching puzzles, you should be approaching problems, you should be approaching interfaces from the perspective of somebody who has never seen anything like this before. How are they going to react? How are they going to understand it? What are the possible misunderstandings? What are the possible sort of mistaken mental models that could be created, that could sort of create confusion or frustration between the player and the game? And then try to address those problems specifically, right? If the problem is that the player, may think that they've solved the puzzle when they haven't, then a solution to that would be to give them negative feedback, to when they exit out of the puzzle, make it very clear to them that the puzzle has not been solved. when I'm trying, because I've run into this a few times, right? I'm trying to think of ones that that really fall under a usability banner, and the nails and the pennies kind of do, and that, I mean, I would say that's a foregrounding problem. That's not really a usability issue, except unless there's an understanding in Nancy Drew games that that you have to be looking carefully in the backgrounds, which maybe that is, and maybe that's just something that I'm not used to and that I missed. But I think in general that's just a matter of that's a visual design, that's a contrast sort of an issue, lighting or foregrounding or something like that. But things like some of these puzzles that I've been mistaken about, or that, that kind of thing. The only real solution to that I know is to do usability testing, where you bring in your target group. You bring in people that you are most concerned about. So in the case of a game like this, obviously you would want to test it with people who've played Nancy Drew games, because that's most of your audience. But then the part of your audience that is sort of most at risk are people who haven't played Nancy Drew games. And so you want to make sure that you do enough testing with them that you are, where you're doing testing that is about trying to observe and reconstruct the mental models that they have, and especially where there's friction between what they think and how the puzzles actually work. And once, I mean, like the actual solutions, those are just design problems, and that's going to be different sort of in every case. But identifying where those problem areas are, that's the really hard problem. That's the kind of usability testing where you would put somebody in a room with one-way glass, or you would set up like screen capture. You would do something where you essentially leave a person alone. You remove the ability of the designers or the testers to influence them. What we do, I mean, we do in our classes, when we have students playing games, we have a 2-minute rule. And the 2-minute rule is basically, no matter how confused the players are, no matter how wrong they are in how they interpret your instructions, no matter how badly they are screwing up playing the game, you are not allowed to say anything to them for at least 2 minutes. And if you get 2 minutes into it and they haven't figured out like what the solution is, if they're doing something that is so off track that it's not even your game anymore, then you can consider stepping in and correcting them. Because at some point, like, it's not worth observing a group of people or a person playing a game that is the wrong game. But you need to give them that 2 minutes, that unbelievably uncomfortable, frustrating 2 minutes, in order to see that, because the point isn't just that like you identify where there's a problem. The point is that I understand, that you empathize with the player and what they're thinking. You understand how they're getting it wrong, and to do that, you really need to see how that plays out. Now, at a professional level, at an industry level, at a game like Nancy Drew, I don't know what your testing setup is, or was for this game. Like, I don't know if you had specific usability tests. I don't know if those were done, what kind of location or what kind of test protocols were put in place. I don't know who actually like conducted those tests. So I don't know if any or how any of this applies, but that's how we do it in our lab, in our, in our student projects, in our like small group lab projects, that kind of thing. We'll do those kinds of tests. What's the coolest thing that has happened in your XCOM 2 play so far? So my favorite thing, like avoiding spoilers as much as possible, because to some extent XCOM frustrates me in that it can be spoiled. I sort of want it to be a perfect information game. I want it to be a strategy game where like I know the things that I should be preparing for, and I am basically judged on how effectively I prepare for the variety of things that could happen. But there are some like gimmicky moments in that game. And I believe that there are some more in the last couple of missions that I haven't gotten to yet. But there's one that involves a UFO, and it's pretty super gimmicky, and it's pretty fucking great. And especially if, depending on the disposition of your soldiers, and if this happens sort of like right after a difficult battle, then things can get really super crazy. So that was a cool moment. That was a moment that reminded me of, I feel like I can't spoil this anymore. In Enemy Within, I forget the name of the mission, but there's a mission that takes place in like Norway, I think, in a fishing village. And this is what I'm talking about. This is like a super gimmicky mission where you have your team and you land and you're like exploring this village. And most of the levels that you play in XCOM are randomly generated to some extent. Like there's some procedural logic and you're not always going to find the same thing, but this is not. This is like a carefully designed level that you have to march through, and there are a couple of aliens who attack you as you go, but there's not a lot of them. There's just a couple, and you make pretty easy progress, although like the level is really littered with obstacles, and so you have to like you're trying to watch every corner and make sure you're not missing anything. But actually there's very little resistance, and you go all the way down this long like this stretch of the village, and you get to the end where a ship has run aground, and it's a whaling ship, and there's like a whale in the cargo hold, and the aliens are using the whale carcass as raw material to generate infinite chrysalids, and the chrysalids are these like terrifying spider-like aliens that can like totally kill you, and then they turn people into zombies, and then the zombies like chest burster more chrysalids out of them, and so they're just like popping out of this whale carcass, and you basically get to the far end of the mission, and your orders change, and you have to plant an explosive, which you do, or you plant a homing beacon, and the only way that like you can do this is to rain fire from above. So they're going to send like an airstrike. So you set the homing beacon, and then they're like, okay, so now you have 5 turns to get everybody back to the evac zone before the airstrike, or they're all going to die. And that's what the mission becomes, is you're being chased by these really fast, really dangerous aliens that are spilling out of this whale carcass, and you've got to race everybody back. And it's an interesting gimmicky level where once it's spoiled, once you do it once, the experience is very different, right? Because you know that you're not going to face a lot of resistance going down, and you know that you need to position your troops in a way that it's going to make it easy for them to retreat, because you know that's what you're going to be doing, and you send sort of like one guy out to plant the homing beacon, and everybody else is pulled back and arrayed in a defensive position, and it's not nearly as terrifying. But the first time that you do it and you don't know what you're getting into, and the word comes down that like now you're on a clock, and if you don't get everybody out, and your troops are like a mess because you didn't expect this. If you don't get everybody out in a certain number of turns, then they're going to get caught in this air raid. Then that's fucking crazy. And so there is a better one of those that involves a UFO in XCOM 2, and I say it's better because I feel like although there are definitely things you can do strategically to prepare for it, it is less dependent on the surprise that comes halfway through that Norwegian fishing village mission. It is more just a, hey, we're changing all of the rules for a minute, which is great. So that was a great moment. I got Thanarod and the reincarnation of Eve White are my two psychics, and they are fucking ridiculous psychics. And so there was another level where I dominated, which is the power where you can like permanently mind control an enemy. I dominated the two like most powerful enemies on the map, and then just had them turn around and lay waste to everybody else. And that was awesome. Like that was a really cool moment where I felt like I was totally overpowered, which is, I love. That's fantastic. And then I guess the third cool moment is that I have, like, all of my friends are playing this game and I am a character in all of their games. And so every day I go into work and they tell me the exploits of like, well, Sean, you and, everybody else just got absolutely slaughtered. Or that kind of thing. Like, or maybe not, maybe you didn't, but mostly it's you and everybody else got totally slaughtered. And that's just, I love that. That's such a blast. So fantastic. I'm really looking forward to finishing this campaign, because at this point I have, like a long list of characters that I have created. And so I'm really looking forward to going into the next campaign, and just having the game pull from that list and having characters randomly come up who are like people that I know, and then I can do the same thing. I can like post to them on Twitter or whatever about what happens in my campaign. So I think I'm anticipating that being another really cool XCOM 2 moment. Okay, I'm gonna not talk a lot about the next couple of questions because then I'm gonna go. Do you think that real-time events like taking 15 minutes to charge the cell phone better connect players to the game? I don't feel especially well connected to the game through that. I think that that's a nice little tool to create a change of pacing. So there's a thing in this game where at this point, at least, like this late in the game, I've got like 2 or 3 or 4 active puzzles. I've got like things that I recognize, hey, this is a locked box. I need to figure out how to open it. And I don't have all of the tools that I need yet. But I'm looking for them, and like I am actively waiting to discover them. And when I discover them, I'm going to run back to this thing and try to open it or unlock it or figure it out, solve it. And most of the time, the way that works is like I see a thing that I can't solve. I go and eventually, like, by doing something else, I find the codex. I find like the thing that I need in order to solve it, and I go back and I solve it, and that presents me with like a clue or a codex or another puzzle or something that like sends me somewhere else to work on another one of these active puzzles. But the cell phone thing was a different way of interacting, right? That was like I solved that puzzle, and instead of it sending me to another thing or unlocking something right there, it basically said, why don't you work on something else for a little while? Like, there's plenty of other things that you could be working on. Why don't you just pursue some of the other leads that you have, come back and worry about this later? And I thought that was really cool. I don't know that it made me feel like, hey, this game is real time. Or, you know, I'm just like Nancy Drew waiting for a cell phone to charge. That's not super compelling to me, but it was from a like narrative pacing standpoint, and from a cognitive pacing standpoint, from the standpoint of how I am switching between tasks. I found that really interesting. I thought it was really effective. It was good. And then last question is, what's your sense of how this game reflects the South? Does it feel stereotypical to you as a non-Southerner? Does it read as genuine and perhaps not stereotypical? Are there characters who seem more stereotypical than others? Or are you fazed by the Southernness of the characters at all? I mean, I'll be honest, like, there are times when the game really kind of highlights its Southernness. And it does that. Some of the characters have accents that are heavy. And some of the world is certainly, painted with that brush. Looking at the menus, you can't help but sort of like recognize how Southern those dishes, that whole menu is. Looking at like some of the books, and that kind of thing. But beyond that, it doesn't feel like it's first of all, it doesn't feel over the top to me. It doesn't feel like the game is like constantly hitting me over the head with stereotypes or even references. And honestly, like a lot of the time, I'm not thinking about how Southern it all is. I mean, it definitely, like, the story would be different if it was somewhere else, if it was in, a northern or western region of the United States. Like, there are things that would have to change, but I don't feel like the characters, like, wouldn't work. That they're just, like, somehow ineffably locked into the Southern context. I feel like they're rich enough characters, I guess. They're sort of and it's possible that for me that's actually like I'm glossing over, it's not true enough to its Southernness. It's not the game isn't like really embedded in that context, because I can sort of ignore it or forget about it. I don't know if either of those are quite the right term, but I'm not, constantly in that mind space in a way that I feel like Shadow at the Water's Edge, maybe just because that was more foreign, maybe because it was more exoticized. I feel like it was more exoticized. I feel like Japan in that game was more about, hey, look, it's Japan. And so you kind of could never forget that you were in Japan. Whereas in this game, yeah, it feels Southern, like it's definitely Southern. There's no question. But it doesn't feel like that's what the game is about, or that's what the story is about, or that that's the only thing that the characters have going for them. And I'm tempted to read that as a sort of authenticity, that that this is a story that takes place in the South, that is influenced by the South, but is not like exoticizing the South. That's how I'm reading it. And I don't know if that's how Southerners would also read it. I think that's about all I have to say about that. Yeah. Okay. Thanks, guys. This was great. This was fun. I think maybe I'll finish the game soon. I expect to be doing this again next week, so maybe that'll be the last Nancy Drew, and then we'll have to find a different game. I also think that I'll probably finish Firewatch sometime before then, either this weekend or on Monday. If not, because there's not going to be a Mostly Walking on Monday. Sean is crunching on his game. Yeah, great. Thanks again, everyone. Thanks for all the great questions, and can't wait to see you next time. Have a good night.